Anything now, guys? Can you hear anything? Anybody hear anything now? I'm just checking here. Let's see. I don't know why this is. Oh, okay, cool. We're here. All right. Thank you, Mr. JSV650. I wish I knew your name, but it's a Mr. At least we know it's a Mr. And thank you, Sandy, of course. Okay, guys, thank you. Does it sound clear? Does it sound okay? I don't know. This thing can be buggy sometimes. But anyway, so I'm talking about the. Okay, cool, excellent. So I'm talking about the recent article on Turtle Boy. I know some of you guys that are on this channel have been focusing on the Karen Reed case. Did you guys see the Turtle Boy's recent article? There's been a move filed by the prosecution to gag the defense and to remove one of the defense's main attorneys, Attorney Jackson. The main complaint is that they're accusing the defense of trying this in the media, and they're actually really going out of their way to say that one of the problems is that they're feeding information to. I don't think they mentioned Turtle Boy by name, but they talk about how people are going to harass witnesses at kids' games and stuff like that. So they're clearly talking about Turtle Boy, and I'm not sure. Let's see. I can go back and look and see if they actually. How specifically they mention that, but it says defense counsel directly encouraged media outlets to continue to contact witnesses and ask them inflammatory questions. And witnesses have suffered unwarranted invasion of privacy as they have been receiving repeated and harassing phone calls. Family members of witnesses have been contacted and harassed, and the victim's family has suffered emotional harm. And that seems to be the main part of their complaint. They do talk a little bit about the contamination of the jury pool. But to me, the only reason you would ever want to, I'm not a lawyer. To me, the only reason you would ever want a gag order is you're worried about contamination of a potential jury pool. But that strangely, their motivation seems here just to be to protect the McCabe's and I guess maybe the Alberts, but mostly the McCabe's in this case. I don't know. I don't. Is that a I mean, it's. The privacy of the McCabe's is obviously important, but is that really a proper concern when it comes to justice or when it comes to the state? The state is supposed to represent the public. But you do run into a difficult situation. I think I'm not a lawyer. So again, in these cases, one of the challenges is that you don't want to conduct a trial in public. You don't want to conduct it by media. That defeats the purpose of having a trial with rules. However, what do you do if the system itself is corrupt? If you have corrupt prosecutors, corrupt police involved, you're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place there. Because you're not going to be able to defeat that level of corruption unless you create a certain amount of public pressure. So sorry about the white shirt, guys. I didn't know this would be this white on this under these lights. So I don't know what you guys think about that. Are you guys following the Karen Reed case at all, or are you guys here for Delphi? Or I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that. There's only a few of you here. When I read this article, I wanted to talk about it because, I think there's a lot of controversy associated with Turtle Boy, but this also kind of shows this highlights the reason for the controversy, but also the reason for why he's kind of essential. Because if this does involve corruption, there's just no way to expose that or create the kind of pressure needed without media. And he's the only media that's willing to cover this stuff. He might go a little too far. He definitely does, in my opinion. But he is kind of essential. So, and then the other thing, I had a podcast with Dave today. This was part 2 for the brand new Yellow Tape podcast. It was about an hour. I'm going to add some pictures and be posting it later. You can also hear it on the podcast show called Law Enforcement Today, which gets hundreds of thousands of viewers. They take about a week to post Dave's stuff, even though he's one of the more popular shows on there. It just takes them a while because I think they add in some commercials and some music and things like that. So I'm not even sure if episode 1 is posted yet. I think that'll probably go up tomorrow, and then maybe 2 will go up at the same time. But Dave's got It's a really fascinating case. In fact, not just a case. He's tracking multiple cases. He's been following these for 7 or 8 years. He works in law enforcement, but he's doing this on his own time, and he's got a mountain of evidence. He's really by himself. He has there's one other person out there who is following these cases. This is somebody named Melanie Perkins. Her focus has been mostly on the Andy Puglisi case. Dave and Melanie have spoken together in the past, but they really haven't been working together. I kind of have helped bring them back together over the last couple of weeks, and I think Melanie felt a little bit threatened by Dave, but now she sees, they shouldn't be competing against each other. They should be trying to get to the truth. And that's what originally brought her into this field, because her childhood sweetheart was taken and never seen again by a public swimming pool. And this was in my hometown of Lawrence, and I'm the same exact age as Melanie, a year younger than Andy. I remember it very well when he went missing. So Dave and Melanie both feel that on their own, with their own evidence, they're on the cusp of very big breakthroughs. And now they've agreed to work together and to share notes. And Dave was never really competing with her, but I think she felt that she had to compete with him, so she guarded her secrets a little bit more carefully. But they're going to work together, so I think there will be some big breaks over the next few months. We're going to try to do something that is obviously way beyond the experience and the resources of this particular channel, but we're going to try to have a documentary series based on them. We're going to do some of the early filming at the end of July, and then I do have a professional editor, and he's going to make a trailer out of it, and then we'll do some fundraising. If anybody on the channel wants to help us out, we really, really do need the help. I don't care what it is you think that you like to do, anything you have a passion for. I mean, I'm just an old bartender. I don't have any law enforcement experience. I broke up fights. I made good Bloody Marys. I made great Long Island iced teas. I probably still could if you put the ingredients in front of me, but none of that's very useful to true crime. And I'm still trying to help these guys, and I'm trying to bring their work to light. So you could do it too, any role you want. If you just want to help us with social media, if you live in the New England area and you want to come out with us, we're going to be doing some field work this summer. So we'd love to have you. And we while we do need the help, a big thing, hey Dave, a big thing that means a lot. I know to Dave, and I would imagine to Melanie too. I've only spoken to her a few times. But I know that it's Dave, you feel like you're alone out there doing this work. You feel like, I don't want to, you're studying these things. Some of them are old cases. Some of them lead to more, and you see enough evidence there where you know kind of what's going on, but you don't have that smoking gun. And you start, I think, questioning whether you're ever going to get the smoking gun and whether anybody's paying attention. And so I'm sure there are really long, dark moments on the road for Dave. And he goes out he's been Michigan, Ohio, Florida, going on scene to investigate all of these cases. And he walks in the footpaths of the monsters, of the victims. He takes all of this stuff to heart. So I think it really actually, if nothing else, means a tremendous amount to them to have people at their backs, watching their work, checking it out, giving their feedbacks. I think it means a lot to him. So the more we can do that, the better. I also just want to talk a little bit about, there was somebody on the channel. I can't remember who it is right now, but it told me to look into and I mentioned him a little bit yesterday, and we talked about it a little bit on the podcast today, the Oakland County, Michigan murders from the 70s. And this is basically Detroit and the surrounding cities. And, wow, it's hard to believe this stuff was going on, but it's so relevant to the case we're working on now in the series that I've been working on called Outer Demons, which is centered a lot on the work of Dave and of Melanie, but particularly of Dave. And these were cases that involved monsters who were hunting down children, and they centered in the 70s, and most of the cases actually were in like 75, 76, 77, right in that 2-3 year range. Well, strangely, here we have in Oakland County, which is Detroit, the same thing in the same years, and very similar things going on. There were some different things about those cases, some pretty unique things about those cases, and they also remain unsolved, although there's some good suspects. But and Dave Jenkins, you might be interested in this too. one of the quests that we've had in this series, and me and Dave have had, looking at the Delphi murders, and Dave McGrath has had for years, looking at these cases in New England, is the idea of whether the accomplices work together on these predatory crimes. Well, in Detroit, they absolutely were, because they were taking these kids, and the kids would survive. They would keep the kids alive for multiple days. In one case, they kept the kid alive 19 days, and then they would kill them. Now, some were girls, some were boys. The girls were not sexually molested. They were just taken, kept alive for a period of days, and then killed. The boys were sexually molested, and then they were killed. So interestingly, one of the boys, they know from looking at the autopsy and stuff that he was given, I'm not sure how many days he was captive. I think maybe a couple of weeks, but on his hours before his death, I think he was strangled. Hours before his death, he was giving his favorite meal. He was a 10-year-old kid, and his favorite meal was Kentucky Fried Chicken, which is interesting. But also interesting, they groomed him. That's how it's written in the story or the article. That he was groomed. I assume that means they gave him a haircut. So why would you give a haircut to a child when you're about to murder him? Well, I mean, I can only think of one reason, and I think I mentioned this in the other episode the other day, is that if you're actually making right, that's, yes, Sandy, right, I thought it was you, Sandy. I just didn't want to say it and make a mistake, because I made a mistake the other day when I was talking about Jeff. I thought that was you. Thank you, Sandy. And I wasn't familiar with those. Dave actually, of course, not only is familiar with him, but he went to Detroit and spent several weeks there investigating him. So he's going to go into more detail. He was wondering whether Wayne Chapman's and some of these people that he's connected from up here were connected to those cases. So in that, I'm sure Sandy can tell you about this too. Sandy grew up in New England. Sandy grew up in New England and moved to. Yeah, so she knows that very well. So, so there was a witness to one of the abductions or something close to it, because they saw the kid with his skateboard talking to a guy who was driving a green or a blue Gremlin. That was the vehicle he was driving. And this guy was later convicted for child sexual exploitation crimes and was in jail for a lot of time, for many years. And they offered him a deal of immunity to get reduced time. All he had to do was take a polygraph for those Detroit cases. And I actually think he was in Ohio when they offered him that. He refused. He'd rather take the longer sentence. He did not want to talk about those cases. So he was obviously a main suspect in it. But then here's where it gets strange. So there were hairs found in his blue Gremlin. Those hairs were matched to hairs found on some of the crime scenes. Now, back in the 70s, that's all they could have done. They didn't have DNA technology. But those hairs were saved. And then more recently, they did good DNA testing. And with that DNA testing, they were able to do a match. But those hairs did not belong to this guy. I think his name was Sloan, who owned the vehicle. So, of course, there's a chance that Sloan lent his car out to someone who turned out to be the killer. But then you have to remember Sloan was finally convicted on other cases related to, I forget the exact charges, but child exploitation and child abuse charges, child sexual abuse crimes. So it very strongly suggests that there were accomplices there. There was this guy Sloan, and he was in the vehicle with at least one other person who left those hair things behind. But it gets a little deeper too, connecting to the question of not only whether there are accomplices, but whether it was connected to CSAM. So one of the things with Dave McGrath's theory, and also Melanie too, by the way, is that these cases are connected to the production of child pornography, and it's connected through the mafia, which was interested in the commercial aspect of that. Now, I am not someone that tries to run wild conspiracy. You'll never hear me running a satanic cult conspiracy thing. If I push that kind of a theory, I'll probably get 1 million hits, because they're all creepy and they're fascinating, but they're silly, they're bogus. I just want to stick to the truth. I know Dave McGrath and Dave Jenkins here is the same way. So, child pornography was a real thing. That's not a conspiracy theory. So, and the mafia was the leading producer of pornography, and that would include child pornography. Now, was there a connect? Did they exploit the victim? I'm sorry, did they exploit the monsters who were out in the field who were into that in order to help develop those videos? Well, that's the main thesis of Dave's work, and that's and also of Melanie's theory. So here we have in this case here, there was someone else that was arrested. That was I'm not sure if a suspect, but in the area, whose father was one of the top executives from General Motors. His last name was Busch, Busch. I forget his first name. I'm going on memory here. Well, this kid was arrested for something to do with child pornography charges. This was back in 1978, so this was not some internet thing. This guy must have had videotapes. And I assume he was involved with distribution. I don't think back then you would get arrested just for possession. Because they didn't look at this stuff the same way back then. It wasn't even a crime, actually. It was just, it fell under regular obscenity laws. So he was arrested, and just weeks later, he was found dead inside a hotel room. It was ruled a likely suicide. It was not a suicide. Okay, the guy shot it. The bullet wound was right between his eyes. There were 4 other shell casings in the room. There was no gunpowder residue on his shirt. There was no blood splatter residue near him. There was a hand-drawn picture of one of the victims screaming, pinned on the wall, and there were bloody ligatures in the room. So it has kind of all the obvious makings of a situation where someone was arrested and someone else was afraid he was going to start spilling his guts, and they had him killed. And they made sure he didn't spill his guts. So, yeah, exactly, John. So, Benjamin John. So I guess it's Benjamin. Ben. Ben always has great comments on the channel. It almost sounds like Ben's a lawyer. But if you are a lawyer, Ben, let me know on the Karen Reed thing how close I am on that. What's the rules on what do you do? What would be the basis for gagging the defense? How far can you go if how far do you have to prove that defense attorneys were leaking stuff to friendly media such as Turtle Boy? But anyways, back to the Detroit case. So the other thing, now I found out today from talking to Dave McGrath, and this is what goes into this in the episode that'll be posted soon. In that same area in Ohio, that was Detroit, but just south in Ohio, where some of these victims later moved to, there was a Catholic priest who was also later shown to be heavily involved with the distribution of child pornography, and he was an abusive priest. Well, he also was found shot the same way, with a bullet between his eyes and empty shell casings in the room. Kind of interesting that the same MO was used to kill him as it was used to kill the other guy. And also, when I look at the other guy, the son of the General Motors skiing, and so you look at the strange evidence in the room, like placing the bloody ligatures in there, and the drawing of the child victim on the wall. That to me suggests that the person that killed him, let's assume he to have that evidence, he must have been some level of accomplice in those other crimes against those children. But the fact that he saved those ligatures and put that picture on the wall possibly suggests that he was not an accomplice. His interest was not in doing those kind of things. His interests were maybe commercial. So in other words, maybe he was assigned by someone in that industry, hey, go help this guy make these films and we'll pay you. And so maybe he was even ravaged by guilt. Otherwise, why not just kill the guy? And why go through the effort of leaving the bloody ligatures there and trying to link him to that crime? Unless you're trying to misdirect the police or something like that too. That's true. Thank you, 3L. I forget to do those things. Yeah, hit the like, make a comment, tell me to go fuck myself, whatever you guys want to do. Comment, because comments actually drive the algorithm. And we're starting to learn that's I'm going to start doing the live shows, I think, every day, just because they're fun and I get to meet you guys and it feels like I'm actually in the same room with you. I wish there was a way we could do this like Zoom and we could be in the same room. But that's a lot more fun. And to me, that's what the channel's been all about. We're not going to get millions of views. We're not even going to get thousands of views, but I've met some really fantastic people, Dave Jenkins, and Dave McGrath, and a lot of other people such as you guys that have been, I can never get 3021 to tell me his name. He's always helping out in the comment section, but I don't know if it's a he or she. Someday I'll get some information. Looking through in the A's. Mob did a hit in your neighborhood. This is for Mr. Jarvis in Southfield. Yeah, I'm not sure what that was, but so there was another case today that this was something that Dave Jenkins was interested because he had spent a week out here too. This has been there was a press conference on this yesterday. This was murders 40 years ago, same time period as always, 40 or 50 years ago maybe. There were a couple of murders in a town in Ohio. I can't remember. The memory escapes me. It has a weird name. It sounds like a person's name, but they just connected DNA to the killer. They had saved the underwear, most of the time in these cases, they don't do that. And again, we saw some shoddy police work there because they ruled that one of the kids was that he had died of an epileptic stroke, but other cops were suspicious because they saw the wounds and different things like, no, this is a murder. So fortunately, those other cops, not the non-official cops, and that's a lot of times what it is people that aren't officially assigned to something, but they're just good people. And they, good cops that just stay on the case like a dog with a bone because what they care about is justice. They're not looking for promotions or anything like that. They're looking for justice. And so they stayed on the case. The clothing got saved, and then they got the DNA testing. The way the DNA was matched was, as this is really going on all the time now, is through the Ancestry.com database, things like that. So you don't even have to have the killer's DNA. You just have to have family members. So probably most of us here have spit into the cup at one point. Even a couple of years ago, my 99-year-old grandmother, they made her spit into a cup. They wanted to trace her genealogy. So all you have to do is just kind of get it close because it shows how, and then eventually you can get to your suspect. So this guy, they're calling him a serial killer, although he's only linked to the 2 cases, and he died. He died about 5 years ago, so justice was never served on him, and he moved to California not long after that. But the questions, again, no one knows at all the circumstances of how these kids were taken and how they were killed. All we know is that there's a DNA match to 2 of the children in their underwear, so there may have been accomplices there too. And what Dave McGrath has found was that priest who I mentioned, who was shot, killed, and was based out of this city, which I can't remember the name of it. Maybe someone can look it up for me. And it's not a big city. He said it's kind of a large town. So, and there was a couple other connections that also led to that. I think there might have been an adult bookstore there. So there were a lot of connections that led just to this one little town, which whenever you see that, you do have to be suspicious that were people working together. And so, thank you, Cleo. Yeah, so were they working together? I don't know. To me, the evidence remains tantalizing, but elusive and not conclusive. Dave and Melanie are convinced of it. Dave Jenkins, who's done a tremendous amount of work on the Delphi case, is convinced that there's something going on there. I can't dismiss that evidence because in Delphi, it would really have to be a strange coincidence that Richard Allen is the killer and Keegan Klein was catfishing him and is not involved. So, and there were others, and I think we're going to get Dave Jenkins on soon. So please give him some pressure, guys. He's the one that went out in the field and took some video for us and investigated on location a couple months ago too. And pretty soon, I think in July, he's going to be going to Evansdale, where the 2 girls, that case is also cold. The 2 girls were killed there. 2015, maybe. I'm not sure the year, going on memory. Actually, come to think of it, I don't remember. Is that Evansdale where the girls, was that in Indiana? or Iowa. I can't even recall exactly where it was. But to me, when I looked at the evidence for that case, I said, and I found that evidence on Gray Hughes's channel. I know people have different feelings about Gray Hughes, but he does manage to get some good videos and stuff like that. And when I went out and looked where the bikes were found and the cell phone and stuff like that, Iowa. Thank you, Cleo. So when I looked at where that was left behind, where they found the bikes, and then also where the bodies were eventually found, which was, I forget how many miles away, it was brought out. They were brought out to a wooded area, very secluded wooded area, and they were found there months later in the middle of the winter by some hunters. So when I looked at the bikes were found on a bike path that was like 50 yards from the highway, and the highway was a 3-lane highway, but looked like there was no traffic on it, so it mustn't be the busiest highway in the world. And you could pull out, the fence was knee high, you could jump over that fence and then run over to the bike path and throw the girl's stuff onto it if you wanted it to look like that's the girl's, where they were taken. That's what it looked like happened to me. And to do that, you would need accomplices. You wouldn't need, but I mean, it's just, you're going to pull over on the highway by yourself and make a couple of trips hopping these fences and pulling it over there. I mean, it doesn't seem likely. It seems more likely to me that, now it's possible the girls were taken off the bike path, but there's also the surveillance footage shows the last known direction they were traveling was not towards that area. With the bike path was near a lake. They were, I believe, Dave, you can tell me if I'm wrong, they were traveling in the opposite direction. But then they were found over there, so it's possible they turned around and went back. But the area, if that's where they were abducted, the highway is right there, and there's no trees around, and it's a bike path, and it's not far from the lake. So what a dangerous place to try to abduct not one, but two girls. You know, all it takes is one car driving by. You're going to abduct them, and you're going to drag them 50 yards and over the fence and into your van. I don't think that's where the abduction place is, but even if it is, that's got to be accomplices. And to me, I went into this last year. I was like, nah, there's never accomplices. It's always a lone predator, maybe a rare exception like the Jeffrey Curley case in Massachusetts from like 15, 20 years ago. But now you wonder, because I asked Dave the question, how many of these are cold cases that, they go unsolved and there's no evidence? And it turned out to be, so he looked it up. He guessed that it was 70%, and he was remarkably close, because we looked it up online, and it was 67%. So 67% of these cases are completely unsolved. So we don't know who killed them, why, how. In a lot of cases, you don't even find the body. But so you don't know if they were accomplices. Could have been a team of football players. I mean, you just don't know anything. So the other thing about the Evansdale case was, when I looked at the bodies, Gray Hughes does a great job of showing how you would have to drive over to here. And then he actually even had some video of the bodies covered by a tarp. I think it was like helicopter video after they were found, but before they were taken off the scene. And so you would have had to walk a fairly good distance with those bodies. I think maybe, I forget, maybe a half a mile, definitely at least a quarter mile, and deposit two bodies. They weren't little girls. They were not big girls. You could carry them, but to carry two, I think they were 10 years old. And the bodies were not found. To me, one of the indications was Lyric and Elizabeth, right, Cleo? The bodies were not found together. And I don't know why. To me, I don't have a basis for saying this, but for me, if one guy carried both those bodies there, whether he did it in 2 trips or 1 trip, I think that they would leave the bodies together. Yes, Lyric and Elizabeth. And I personally think that they would leave. Dave said, last seen pedaling away from the park, but the bikes. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. So thank you, Dave. That's exactly what I was thinking. So I personally think that if someone was going to take those bodies over there, they would leave them more or less in the same spot, within a few feet of each other. But so to me, and they were spread out, looked like by at least 50 yards in between them, which kind of tells to me 2 different guys, each taking a body over, walking kind of near each other, and then spreading out and just kind of dropping the bodies and going back. So that's not a lot of proof. But again, you could have a case that involves accomplices here. I don't even actually, Dave, were those girls sexually, maybe, you know what, the bodies were found so much later, maybe they don't know. I don't even know if those were sexual abuse crimes. It may have been something completely else. But anyway, so that's what we're trying to find out here. That's what Dave's been after for 7 years. Are there accomplices on these cases? Not just are there accomplices, like do these guys meet each other and decide to hang out and work together on their peculiar habit, right? It's more than that, because what Dave has found is that there are powerful institutions that tend to protect these people. That, again, I'm not fully convinced of it. I've seen enough to think, yeah, that is kind of interesting, but I haven't seen enough to say yes. Now, we know that this went on with the Catholic Church, and some of this stuff is, in fact, connected to the Catholic Church. And then if the mafia was involved, if they were involved with we know the mafia was involved with distributing porn. There's no doubt they were involved with distributing child porn. If there was money to be made, they were involved. Were they capitalizing on the sex drives of these predatory monsters, basically saying, all right, we don't care what you do or how you make them, just make us the video and we'll pay you for them? Was that happening? We want to find that smoking gun evidence. That's like huge for us to find that. And to me, when I say we, this is mostly Dave, but anybody that wants to help him. And to me, if we can find that kind of evidence, you're talking about something similar to the Boston Globe Spotlight team, on which the movie Spotlight was based, which was the uncovering of the Catholic priest scandal. Except in this case here, the Spotlight team had all the resources and power and connection of full-time journalists working on a team. This is pretty much Dave McGrath, and to a lesser extent, but important extent, Melanie. And then now hopefully us a little bit, not that we can do too much. But if they feel that we got their backs, they're going to do a lot more. I mean, they're going to go through that. So, guys, thank you very much for being here. A couple more. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I'm going to watch for it. I do want to say too, the live has been fun. I'll get better at doing it. I really like to meet everybody here. I have a story that I recorded the other day that's a little different for this channel. I kind of am starting a new series on this called Yellow X, and it's basically just telling an X-Files type story. So if you know of any, send them to me, or I'll look for something in the headlines. Like recently, there was something. There's someone who claims that the government has UFOs. I can say honestly, I don't believe the government has UFOs. I don't tend to believe in ghosts. I don't tend to believe what else, Bigfoot, zombies, aliens. But I'm a writer. I love a good story. So who doesn't love a ghost story? Who doesn't love a Bigfoot story? I mean, who doesn't love an alien invasion story or an alien abduction story? They're awesome. So I only had one real story, and that's what I began with. This is a story that, it may or may not be a ghost story, but it is kind of a cool story, I think, anyways. But this goes back to my bartending days when I was about 22, 23 years old. So I recorded it the other day, and I'm going to post it, tomorrow or the next day. It's no big deal. It doesn't have images or anything. It's just like this, me talking. And another thing that I'm thinking of doing is just doing something that I'm going to call the Daily Yellow or something like that, where we just go on and meet those of us and anything new in the news for true crime, but especially the cases that we look at. I think there's always something breaking, or even if I'm not aware of it, if we come on here, you guys can say, hey, are you aware of this case, like Sandy did with the Detroit case, and say, are you aware of this? This is breaking. This is big. And we always want to focus on a certain theme. For me, you notice I don't really I tend to focus on unsolved cases because I don't like thinking too close. I don't want to feel these cases. I don't want to think too hard about the victims. As long as I'm kind of thinking about solving them or something like that, or gaining some important insight, then that helps me. If the wheels in my mind are spinning, then the part of me that's feeling, because these cases are terrible. I actually had one. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't think I saw your dad's UFO experience. That was cool too. I actually had. Oh yeah. So recently, when I was looking into the David Lewison case, which is episode 2 on the series on my channel called Outer Demons, and this is all focused on these Massachusetts or New England cases. Well, what I didn't know was that the year before, a little girl was taken. Now, the thing about one of the things about the David Lewison case that stands out as really unique is the way his body was found. It was found, he disappeared without a trace, but then his body was found 6 years later inside a steamer trunk inside an abandoned 3-decker tenement. That's odd. And Dave McGrath has looked into this, and that 3-decker was not abandoned at the time that he went missing. It was actually occupied. So it seems unlikely that the body would have been taken there right after the crime, because people inside would have noticed the smell, I think. So that suggests that body was stored somewhere else and then moved there. Good. Hey, Brad, could one person do that? Or does that also require accomplices? Well, there are a lot of strange things about the David Lewison case. Another part of that case was the grooming. There was a mysterious figure that emerged from the woods at least once a couple of weeks before. He called himself Africa, and we don't know anything about him except he was an adult, but he met David and a couple of the other kids in the neighborhood that were playing out there. And in fact, one of the kids, a 4-year-old kid, he took the kid's gun. So David had a plan. This Africa guy must have been coming back on a semi-regular basis, because they knew he was coming back, because David, who was only 6, was a clever kid, and he had a plan, apparently, to get this gun back, the toy gun back for his friend. And so Africa again came from the woods, took David by the hand, walked him off into the woods while David's friend was there, got a full good look at him, and he told the friend, I'm taking him to California. And nobody ever saw him again. And unfortunately, the 4-year-old is too small to really give a description of Africa. It doesn't say in the reports that I read. I'm going to assume Africa is white, because I think those kids might have said this kid was the guy was black because he looked so different to him from what they were used to, So I think probably it was a white guy, but beyond that, nothing else is known about him. However, Wayne Chapman, who was the main suspect in the Andy Puglisi story, the following year, so about a month after Andy Puglisi and Lawrence Went disappeared, Wayne Chapman confessed to the murder of David Lewison and gave graphic details. He said it was an accident. Basically, when he would rape these kids, it would be extremely violent, and some of them died just from the violence of it. And he said he brought the kid to his place, a cemetery called Melrose Cemetery, and that when the kid unexpectedly died, he just left him there. I don't know. I mean, so in the town, they indicted Wayne Chapman, but then eventually they dropped it because they never found any other evidence. They went into that cemetery and excavated the whole thing. They found nothing, no clothing, no body parts, or nothing like that. I don't think in Wayne Chapman's confession he mentioned anything like the name Africa or a toy gun, or even going to that specific house. He had other details, so I think he described the clothing. I'm not sure about that, but there were a lot of details that he did get right. So anyways, the thing that made me almost quit last week was, as I was doing some more research, I found that there was a little girl that disappeared, I think the year before, from the same exact town, and was found in similar circumstances. I think her name was Denise Cochran. Anybody know the name? I'm looking to see. I don't know. Anyways, I think her name was Denise Cochran. She was 10. And the picture of her is just like this black and white grainy picture. But even in that, you could such a sweet looking girl, just angelic, and it's just horrible. And that she had 3 or 4 siblings. She was, I think, maybe the youngest. So the horror of the family members. But Well, first of all, just like I said, I work like 12 hours a day on these things, researching, writing, novel screenplays. This was I don't even do at night. I don't even stop and watch Netflix or anything. I just keep working. This was that moment where all of a sudden I said, fuck, I can't watch this anymore. I felt so down about it. I started watching Seinfeld episodes to try to make myself laugh. And then eventually I came back to it. But the other thing about her case that was really interesting is that she also was found, her body was found inside a container. In her case, it was described as a transformer container inside a steel yard. Now, I know that's different than a steamer trunk in a house, but still, it's a little, I don't know. It's you're leaving. I don't know what the condition of that steel yard was. I'm going to imagine it was probably open at the time, but run down and not much going on at it. It might even have been closed. I'm not sure. So you're talking about, again, leaving a body in a container in an abandoned location. But here was a guy who killed a boy and a girl. So I don't know what was really going on here. When you try to look at these things, are there connections to these cases? I'll run one more by you just since we're having fun going live here. And you guys will hear about this. Oh, hi, Mary. You guys will hear about this on other cases we talk about, but this one has kind of got me obsessed a little bit too. So this is the case of Lee Savoy. Now, in my next episode, I'll talk about in Revere, Massachusetts in 1977, there was basically what you would call a boy brothel in Revere that was busted for running a sex ring. There was a story on this in the New York Times. They indicted 24 people. People were indicted from all around the country and from the Bahamas. There was the school head of an elite boys' school, a teacher from that school, a psychologist, a child psychiatrist, a wealthy bon vivant in New York who had graduated from Harvard. And these were just when they arrested the guy at the house who was running this, he gave him names, but he wouldn't give him all the names he had. He mentioned, for instance, that there were certain names he couldn't give the police because they would end up being a contract out in his life. So that obviously implies mafia. But you got to think that, well, he did give him some pretty influential names like a psychiatrist and a schoolmaster. You know, the politicians, cops, certain wealthy business, were they left off the list? You know, I don't know. So anyways, Lee Savoy went missing. I think that was 1974. So Lee would have been 2 years older than me. So these cases, I'm an old dude. I'm 57, just turned 57. So I got a long way to go to get to 58. But so anyways, Lee was 10 years old. And at the time he used to make, he had his parents, wasn't from a broken home or anything, but everybody was poor back then. Everybody needed money. Kids needed money. And he made money like a lot of kids in cities did back then by being a shoe shine boy, just like in Goodfellas. Go home and get your shine box. And he used to go to a nearby racetrack called Suffolk Downs, which has since been closed. But this was a racetrack, so very close to Boston. It was in East Boston, actually, which is East Boston is technically a part of Boston. So it was in Boston, but very close to the border of Revere. So I think Lee lived about a mile away. And so he said to his mother, I'm going to make some money. So he took a shine kit and set out for the track. However, this is where the story takes what could be a revealing turn. So he goes to a restaurant that was right next to the subway stop that he would get on to go to Suffolk Downs. So he dropped off with the owner, must have known the owner a little bit. He left his shoe shine kit there. He said, "Can I leave this here? I'm going over to the track." So the owner was like, "Okay." And Davis interviewed that owner. The owner's still alive. So why would he leave the thing that he needed to make money at the track? Why would he want to dump that and leave that behind? Well, we will never know. He disappeared and was never seen again. But Lee was also wearing a shirt called a t-shirt that said, "Try it, you'll like it." Now that t-shirt was made famous by a commercial for Life cereal back then. You'd have to be pretty old to remember this, but there was a fussy little kid named Mikey. Try it, you'll like it. In fact, in that commercial are only 3 little boys, and most of these predators, they are focused on boys. So, and certainly that boy brothel was. Well, anyways, where did he get that shirt? There's nothing in the record that said he was given that shirt, but I when I see that, I wonder if maybe someone gave him that shirt, because to an adult that would have a suggestive sound to it that a boy wouldn't understand. So and the boy does go off to the track and he's never seen, but for some reason doesn't take a shoe shine kick. The brothel was also only a mile away from the track. It was a mile. It was kind of, so picture a triangle. It was a mile from Savoy's house, and it was a mile from the track. And no doubt the guys from the brothel used to go and hang around at the track all the time. Certainly any track is legendary for mafia figures hanging out there. So I think if you're at this boy brothel and you're trying to recruit boys, groom them, there was one of the ways they got a lot of them. There was a school bus driver. No, it was a city bus driver in Massachusetts that befriended a lot of boys on his route and would say, hey, if you go to this house, you can make, $5 and get some free beer. And all you got to do is take your shirt off. And one thing progresses to another. And next thing you know, they were basically producing child porn there. But so you can imagine if you want to go recruit these kids at the track, which these kind of predatory monsters would do, I would bet that they had been grooming Lee over a period of time and taking him to that house. And so they probably would say, all right, you want to make a buck? Come over to the house. All you got to do is take your shirt off. And slowly things progress. But you're a poor kid in the city. The one thing you want is money. And you start with small steps. First, you're taking your shirt off. First, all you got to do is have a beer. And I know they were giving beer to kids there, and they were giving marijuana to kids there. So, but when you have all these hundreds of men coming from all around the country and certainly all around the region gravitating towards that location, some of those people are going to have a taste for something more violent. There's no shortage of people in that community who that's their taste for rape. It's awful to think about it, but it's just a reality of life, and it doesn't do any of us any good to not understand that reality. This isn't being prejudiced against any particular group. I'm sure the overwhelming majority of the gay men that were there were probably not doing anything violent, but there was probably a healthy percentage that were open to it. And as Dave McGrath says, people gravitate towards their tribe. So did some of these people draw Lee into? So Lee obviously I would venture to say, was expecting to go there because he left his shine kit behind. If he went there, there's no evidence he went to that house. But to me, when you have this going on just a mile away from the track, it seems like there's a pretty good chance there's a connection there. So maybe he went to the house and somebody went too far. It could even be somebody that had a taste for that offered him a ride home and never brought him home. I don't know. These are awful things to think about, but we're going to continue to talk about them, and hopefully, I really believe we're going to break one of these cases. When I say we, it's really Dave, but we're going to be there with him. We get a back seat, and us having a back seat means a lot to him, I'll be kind of riding shotgun. I call it shotgun. So, well, maybe someone else will take my seat and I'll sit in the back. All right, guys, it's a Saturday night. If you're old like me, you're doing nothing. You're going to watch some Netflix or some lame YouTube videos, and you're going to go to sleep. If you're young, like I once was, like Dave Jenkins once was, you're going to go out tonight. You're not even going to leave the house until 11 o'clock, and then you're going to go out and you're going to raise some hell. And I wish I was with you, but I can't do that. Oh, Turtle Boy's on. Benjamin, thank you for mentioning that. Turtle Boy is on, and there is some really interesting stuff to talk about today. That's why I did this. That came on was I read his article, and I wish we could get a lawyer on here. I mean, because I really want to know what the actual arguments are there. Because I think I do think the judge is going to issue some kind of gag order here, and I don't think it's impossible that she throws Jackson off the case. I would guess that she doesn't, gives him a stern warning. And then if he does anything else, she would throw him off the case. But because clearly the defense team is conducting a trial through the media. But you have to here if you want to get justice for your client. And if this does involve a corrupt prosecutor or a corrupt system, I don't think Adam Lally, the prosecutor, is purposely corrupt or covering up a murder. But he's buying into the narrative that came down the pike and that the system wants him to buy into. He's being a team player. And once he is, the trial system is an advocacy system. He's advocating one side. And however they made that determination within minutes that Karen Reed had done it. Oh, that was another thing that was in the document that said there. I want to go back and look at that just before I hang up, guys, because this was really, to me, it was kind of mind-blowing. Let me see if I can find this on here. Adam Lally, basically, all right, he says, Commonwealth has provided the defendant with a substantial amount of discovery. I mean, that's ridiculous. They're only giving them the evidence that helps convict her, and they're holding back all the evidence that might potentially exonerate her. That's absurd. Then it gets more absurd. The evidence establishes that the defendant, while intoxicated in a snowstorm, operated her motor vehicle in reverse for a period of time before striking the victim at a high rate of speed. I mean, I know that's how a prosecution document is going to read, but there was evidence that she was in reverse. Well, I guess if you call the broken taillight, but there was no evidence that she struck him at a high rate of speed. How fast could you be going in reverse? I don't know. I don't really. I understand some of their case here, but to me, that seems a little over the top. But I guess that's, like I said, it's an adversarial system, so that's how they're going to make it. Is there anybody else you need to say? Anybody other comments here? Anybody else need to say goodbye to here? Let them know. Well, this is Yellow Cottage Tales, so thank you, 3021. You'll see some of the other narrators on the channel. These are people that I had in the past. I would write the episode and have them narrate it. We had one episode here where actually Dave and I kind of wrote and I narrated it because Dave didn't want to put his mug up on here. This is Dave Jenkins. He's got a good mug, though, so we're going to get him up eventually. And TB is on at 9. Laura, they're saying this after 17 months. Oh, man, I wish we could activate Laura so I could put her on the screen and she could tell us what she means. If there's a way to do that, you guys got to tell me. I think the only way is if you use YouTube through a streaming key, a streaming app. So we'll probably do that. So Laura, what do you mean after 17 months? You mean they're saying that the discovery evidence? I think Laura's probably talking about the discovery evidence that they provided a lot of discovery evidence. That's true. It was like pulling teeth out of them. Yeah, I have StreamYard, Laura. I haven't used it with YouTube, so that'll be probably the next thing. So, Laura, when you were talking about the 17 months, are you talking about the fact that the prosecution took so long to get the discovery evidence to her defense team? Yeah, okay. I think that's what you're talking about. All right. So we have a really small but smart crew here right now. So we'll do this regularly, and Turtle's on at 9. So trying to read this here. But we have a really smart crew here. I mean, I really have enjoyed the back and forth with Benjamin John too all the time. So Sandy gave me a great lead into the Detroit case, and so that's for me. That's what it's all about. Is if we can get to a point where we have a solid crew. Where, I mean, I wish I think if we do I guess we'll figure out how to do the StreamYard so I can invite people into the room and they can talk to us. Laura, Benjamin. I've been trying to get Dave Jenkins on for a while, and his main focus is Delphi, and he's got every single piece of information filed away on that. I've got almost everything, but he's got everything. So he's got it all stored in his head. So it'd be great if we can have a conversation about that. And I still get messages from people now on here saying, we got to do something on Delphi. I'm like, man, I did 13 episodes on it. It's not like I haven't done anything on Delphi. There's not a whole lot new lately. There has been some new stuff with Keegan Kline, where he withdrew his guilty plea. And then I think he's now back to submitting his guilty plea and waiting for sentencing. But Dave has followed that much more closely than I am. Turtle is on in 10 minutes. All right. I don't think I can hold it for 10 minutes. See, that's why if we had someone else, you guys keep the seat warm until Turtle comes on. So, but guys, have a great night. I appreciate you being here, and I hope to talk to you again soon. Don't forget, go to actually, you know what? Before you go to Turtle Boy's live thing, go to his website and read the article, because I read a little bit from it for you here. But this is a really good article. And actually, I will mention one other thing too here. Yeah. I will mention one more thing about Turtle Boy. So last week he published he had kind of an online war with Sean McCabe, who I think is the brother of, is it John McCabe? I'm not sure of his first name, Jennifer McCabe's husband. And, most of it was kind of Sean McCabe being stupid and drunk. It was like a stupid bar argument. But Turtle Boy did a good job of not losing focus. He didn't get it. He didn't sling mud with him. He basically was like, what can I get out of this guy? And he actually got something. Good night, Sandy. And he actually did get something big out of him. Matt. Okay. Thank you. He got Sean to admit that there's a federal grand jury. I mean, he didn't quite admit it, but he didn't deny it. And he said, we'll see what the grand jury says. And I would think, I've never been able to nail down, even though I have law enforcement friends from early on, from before even Turtle Boy reported it, saying the FBI was involved in this. But I didn't know whether to believe it. It's not that my friends are lying to me, but I know that even with police, there are rumors that go down the chain, and you're trying to keep something like a grand jury as secret as possible. But certainly, I would think that Sean McCabe would know. And so while a bunch of us have been reporting that the FBI is taking this over, and I remain skeptical about that myself, just until I see the evidence. But that was the closest that I've come to seeing the actual evidence. So kudos to Turtle Boy for bringing that out. Thank you, Mary. So Mary's the one that wants to do more on it. And actually, Mary, when you asked me that, that's one of the reasons. Right after you asked me that, I messaged Dave Jenkins. I said, come on, dude, you got to come on the channel and discuss this with me, because he's got all the facts down on the case, and he can do a much better job of presenting the side of Keegan Kline being possibly involved in it. So, Dave, I won't say too much of the details. He was in law enforcement for years, did undercover work. He calls himself a defrocked priest because he's been out of it for about 20 years. There was a little bit of controversy involved him leaving it. He takes that more to heart than anybody else that was reasonable that would look at that, because everybody would understand what happened there. And the thing is Dave is just, in his heart, is such one of these squeaky clean kind of guys that it's always going to weigh heavily on him. But you'll see when you meet him, this is a squeaky clean kind of guy that you would want trying to chase down your cases. Laura, no sound? Did we lose sound again? Shit. Laura, I would love to have Aiden on, but I think Aiden probably considers us a little too small for him right now. But the thing is the case that I'm working with Dave McGrath, he wants to have Aiden on that. He's on the network Law Enforcement Today, and it has several 100,000 viewers. So it's just an audio. That's a Spotify. It's on Spotify and Apple, and he just oh, cool. Thanks, guys. He just started doing it again. So he's doing it with me. It's called the Yellow Tape Podcast. It's 90% Dave talking, me just trying to keep him on target and ask him some questions and stuff like that. But he does want to have Aiden on, and Aiden would be interested in this. And actually, I think Aiden would be, because he's one of those guys that is willing to take on that stuff that everybody is so skeptical about that they won't even look at it. I want him to sit down and talk to Dave and to Melanie, really. And Melanie's won an Emmy for her documentary, Have You Seen Andy? So I would think that it would be good to get those guys working together. Because they're on the verge of breaking some big things, and I think Turtle Boy could be what puts him over the top. Because if Turtle Boy starts talking about it with them, Turtle Boy has the big Massachusetts following, more tips are going to come out. And some of these people are still alive. Some of the suspects are still alive. Most of them are dead. And there's also reason to believe that some of this stuff is still going on, and there's still people protecting it. It's still not time for Turtle Boy yet. So, anyways, yeah, I would love to have Eden on. But I think the best, really even better, would be to get Dave McGrath on his show, or vice versa, or get them. I mean, really, even if we could ever swing it, to get Melanie and Dave and Aiden to sit down in a room and go over notes, because I think when Eden looks at it, he's going to be kind of stunned, and he's going to be like, wow, this potentially is as big as the whole Spotlight movie. Doesn't quite have that smoking gun there yet, but there was a time, Laura, when the Spotlight team didn't have that, or even Woodward and Birdstein back in hunting down Nixon. You know it's there, but you don't have the smoking gun yet. And I think this is kind of where it is with Melanie and with Dave. And also Melanie, she's been guarding her evidence, but I think she's ready to kind of come out with it. And I think now that she's going to be working with Dave, she's the one that's broken so many of these stories over the last 25 years. In her own way, she's a Turtle Boy, but different. She doesn't do the podcast thing. And I think their politics will be very different. But Laura, so right now it's going to be on both my channel. So we just made episode 2 today, and I'll be posting that tonight or tomorrow morning. And then the same thing will go on Spotify as an audio. Eventually we're going to try to do where we have something a little bit different on my channel related to Yellow Tape that you only get on my channel, and something you would only get on Spotify, so you would have incentive to watch them both. But he has a tremendous following there. He stopped doing it a year ago because he didn't like hosting it himself, even though he can talk on forever by himself. And they kept bugging him with messages, bring it back. You were on the top 10 ranked shows and blah, blah, blah. So when we met and we started going over these cases, we just realized we had so much in common. We're both from poor Massachusetts cities, and it's not as much. I mean, I was very lucky. I had 2 good parents. Dave was from a very abusive situation. Dave is a combat veteran. He went and fought. He's a hero. He went and fought in Afghanistan. But because he's an abuse victim, that was his main incentive into going into hunting down these monsters. But where both me and Dave have a lot in common is that we're both kind of like like a fighter that's getting beat all the time, but just keeps getting up off the mat. That's how I've always been in my life. I get bad news, I get off the mat. I get bad news, I get off the mat. And the last several years, been a lot of bad news, but I never stay on the mat more than a few seconds. So and we're almost there to Turtle Boy's show, and I have just about time to go get a beer from West Townsend so I can watch Turtle Boy's show. All right. Guys, thank you very much. That 2 minutes to get the beer so I can come back, and I'll see you guys in the Turtle Boy show. Check it out. Thanks, guys. Good night, everybody.